Welcome everyone to Introduction to the Sacrament of Marriage. I want to mention that other than this class, Chris Carsons has taught a class on an Introduction to the Sacraments in which he provides an overview to the Sacrament of Marriage, primarily based upon the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I am not going to recover all of that material that he covered there. What we're going to do today is to go a little bit more in depth into the Sacrament of Matrimony. Okay, so let me tell you what we're going to do in these 5 sessions today, and then we'll get started with session number 1. So in this Introduction to the Sacrament of Matrimony, I want to provide a theology of marriage that deals with, first of all, the topic of the mystery of marriage, what is marriage and why does it exist? And then after we do that, we're going to take a walk through the rite of matrimony itself, as it's currently celebrated in the Catholic Church, to try to fill out a little bit more about what are the unique qualities of marriage and married love. Then after that, in the 3rd session, we're going to undertake an understanding of the full sacramental reality of marriage that couples who are baptized participate in as they're joined together before God, the altar, and the world. And then session 4, we're going to cover what I call the living the vows of marriage, kind of the essential spirituality and morality of married life. And then finally, we're going to end in a way which might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but I think is important. We're going to talk about marriage and our ultimate destiny in heaven, which will involve us talking also about how marriage relates to the vocation of consecrated celibacy. So that's the trajectory for today. So I've given you some notes so you can kind of follow along to kind of as a roadmap of where we're going and where we've been as we journey along through today. So let's start with session 1, the mystery of marriage. What is marriage and why does it exist? So marriage is a great mystery. At least that's what St. Paul says, right? In his letter to the Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 32. And we need to understand what St. Paul means when he calls marriage a great mystery. Why is marriage a great mystery? First of all, one fundamental point. There are a lot of visions of marriage in the world. I don't think I have to tell anybody that sitting here. Our culture has a lot of different understandings about what marriage might be. But marriage is ultimately not a human invention. Marriage is a good creation of a loving God, and he designed it for a reason. And what we need to understand in this first session is, what is the fundamental reason why God created this great mystery? The design for marriage that comes to us from our loving Creator, we also need to understand is unchangeable, unalterable, regardless of cultural opinions and how they ebb and flow and change. The nature of marriage itself is not going to change because God's design for human nature and human love is not going to change. Unless he decides to change human nature, marriage itself is unchangeable. I don't see him doing that. The design that God has for marriage is one that responds ultimately to our deepest desires for human love, right? The deepest desires that we have in our hearts. His design for marriage safeguards human dignity and also promotes the well-being of the person and of society as a whole. Now, the brokenness that we see in marriage, right, in our culture, comes from sin. It doesn't come from God. And I think maybe the reason why many people try to provide alternative visions for marriage is because they see the brokenness. But what we need to see is the full reality that God himself made, right, when we talk about marriage. So, the good news is that in the fullness of time, Jesus Christ came to reaffirm and restore God's original plan for marriage, calling us to see marriage in its fullness, in the fullness of its reality. And when St. Paul calls marriage a great mystery, and I put on your handout here, mega mysterion in Greek, magna sacramentum in Latin, he's telling us that marriage is a sign, right? That ultimately that word sacramentum, mysterium, means sign. So marriage, in fact, is a greater sign, a greater mystery than we sometimes realize, than we sometimes give it credit for. It's a sign that stands at the heart of our understanding of our relationship with God from the very beginning, and we'll talk about that. From the very beginning, somehow God intended marriage to be a sign of his love, right? His love for us. And marriage is both a reality present in nature, right, from the beginning, as well as a sign of somehow the relationship between Christ and his church, and a sign of our ultimate destiny with God.